Welcome to Easy English by Eddie Singh, and today we are going to do class 11 Snapshots and the title of the story Birth by A.J. Cronin. Well, children, you'd like to ask what is this story about? Yes, of course. This story Birth is about the duty of a professional doctor and his human behavior. The doctor, Andrew, who had to exercise his professional duty and a good human being. A good
Human being.
So we are going to explore how this story going to test the behavior of a professional doctor in between his professionalism and his human behavior his professional duty and his duty as a human being. Let us see. It was nearly midnight when Andrew Manson, the young doctor, reached Brigor, the place. He found the driller, Joe Morgan, waiting anxiously for the doctor. Who was Joe Morgan? Tell me. Joe Morgan was a man whose wife was to deliver a baby, and she was undergoing labor pain, and she was in a very critical state. Understand? So the person Morgan knew the doctor Andrew, so he wanted the doctor to come to his house and help his wife deliver the baby safely. Am I right? And so Andrew went into the house of Morgan. Understand? Taking his bag and all the necessary medicine. Joe's voice was full of a strain when he reached the doctor's house. Perhaps he was in threat of losing his wife as well as his child. So he just expressed his anxiety to the doctor, but he reposed his full faith in the doctor. He reposed his full faith in the doctor Andrew. A narrow stair led up to a small bedroom in his house. He went up a stair where he saw a tall gray-haired woman nearly 70 years of age and another middle-aged woman. She was an elderly midwife. So there were two women in the upstairs room. How many women were there?
Two.
One was an elderly woman, gray-haired woman, a tall gray-haired woman of nearly 70 years of age, and the other one was a midwife. Now you just ask, sir, who was this elderly gray-haired woman? Ask.
Sir, who was the...
She was the mother of Morgan. Understand? And who was this midwife? The midwife was perhaps, understand, one of the ladies in the house, other than the lady who was to deliver a baby. Now, the other woman was a little bit stout, but she was a midwife. The old woman offered to make a cup of tea for the doctor. Ask her why?
So why?
Because she knew that it would take some time for the doctor to get rid of the case. Understand? Because the case was so critical that the doctor had to stay for some more time there, and she was afraid that if the time prolonged, the doctor might leave the house and go back to his house. So she wanted to prepare a cup of tea for the doctor to comfort him. Andrew drank tea in the kitchen downstairs. He knew he could not snatch even an hour's sleep if he went back home. He also knew that the case would demand all his attention. What did he know? Tell me. He knew that the case was so critical that that it would demand his full attention, the doctor's full attention. Okay? Although later he went up a stair to see the condition of the mother. He noted that there was little progress in the condition of the mother. Then he came down and sat by the kitchen fire. The old woman sat opposite to him. Who sat opposite to him? Tell me.
Woman.
The old woman sat opposite to him. He thought that there might be some, trouble in dealing with the case. The old woman just thought the doctor might be exhausted. He stared broodingly into the fire and remained little bit like quiet for some time. He was, startled when the old woman suddenly asked him not to go and not to give his, daughter-in-law, chloroform, because it was the anesthetic treatment before operation. So she advised the doctor not to give chloroform because she was afraid that the chloroform might harm the baby, but the doctor assured the woman that it would not harm the child and the child would be all the safe. As he gazed at the still form, a shiver of horror passed. The mother was so weak that the doctor was a bit, startled. And when the baby was born, it was just early dawn. The baby was born, but the baby was stillborn. There was no sign of life in the baby. The child was completely lifeless. As he gazed and still looked at the baby, he was a little bit horrified. A horror passed over Andrew. His face heated with his own exertion, chilled, and his obligation towards the mother. She was in a desperate state. The dilemma was quite urgent. Instinctively, he gave the child, to the nurse. He now turned towards the mother and he just wanted to bring, the mother to the condition of consciousness. She was unconscious. She lay collapsed on the bed, almost pulseless and not letting out the effect of medicine to make. Therefore, the doctor gave a sudden, injection just to revive her, strength, and found that there was little bit of breath coming to her and she got, revived. Quickly, the doctor revived the mother and brought her to a strength. He saw that she was now safe. Then he now diverted his attention to the baby. He asked the midwife about the child. She made a frightened gesture because that midwife had kept the baby under bed, wrapping the baby into the newspaper, thinking that the baby was dead. The midwife had kept the baby under the bed, just thinking that the baby was stillborn or deadborn. She had no hope to revive the baby. But when Andrew asked the midwife where the baby was, she was a little bit frightened. There was a frightening gesture in her eyes. And then she brought the baby from the under of the bed and just handed over to Andrew. Andrew knelt down and pulled out the child. It was a perfect formed baby, a limp, warm body, a little bit white, soft as tallow, the head lolled on the thin neck, the limbs seemed boneless, the cord hastily slashed like a broken stem. The whiteness meant only one thing: unconsciousness caused lack of breath, lack of oxygen. His mind raced back to the case he had once seen in the Samaritan. He remembered the treatment that had been used. He instantly asked the nurse to get him hot water and cold water and basins. Now, then he snatched a blanket. He laid the child on the blanket and began a special method of treatment. He hurled the baby into the cold water and then into the hot water. Simultaneously, he repeated the method for half an hour. He hurried the child between the two basins. 15 minutes passed and there was no sign of breath in the child's chest. He was lying still. His breath came patiently, but no breath came from the child. A desperate sense of defeat passed on the doctor. It was a quick spreading hopelessness. The midwife and the old woman were watching the doctor. He remembered the old woman longing for a grandchild, which had been as great as his daughter's longing for the child. All this seemed broken and useless now. The midwife remarked that it was a stillborn baby. Andrew did not pay any attention to that. He eventually labored again and tried to repeat the method. And after some time, he found that there was slight, consciousness in the baby. The baby's breath was there. The baby started breathing. He revived the breath into the baby. And now he rubbed just a cloth over the chest of the baby. By doing so, he found that the baby's pulse started beating. And then there is a cry of the child. The cry of the child finally confirmed that the child was reviving back to life. Reviving back to life. That is how Andrew brought the child back to life and gave it to the nurse. Now he felt little bit relaxed because the mother was also safe and the baby was also safe. That is how Andrew, saved the life of the child as well as the life of the mother. And he just, fulfilled his responsibility as a doctor. His lips, the doctor's lips were dry because for half an hour he was struggling hard to revive the baby to life. And he was also struggling hard to bring back life to the mother. Therefore, after doing all these two responsibilities, the doctor took a long breath and took a full glass of water. He took a drink of water and then sat down. After that, he relaxed, and it was now 5 o'clock. He met Joe and told him that both his wife and his child were safe, and thereafter he left the place. That is how the doctor Andrew brought back life to the stillborn child and the life to the mother. And just, he proved that as a professional, he was really a doctor, and as a human being, he was also like a father, he understood the feelings and emotions of the old lady who was the grandmother of the child. And he also understood the urgency of, following the method and the common sense that he applied for bringing back life to the baby as well as the child. Now, only two more questions that we will deal with just now. Two questions. Question number one. Ask, sir, what is question number one?
So, what is question number one?
Yeah, question number one is related to Andrew, Dr. Andrew. Let us talk about Dr. Andrew's role. One question. Yes. Now ask, what was Andrew's view of marriage? Why was he resentful and confused? Now ask children, what was doctor's view of marriage? Why was he resentful and confused? For Andrew, just tell, for Andrew, marriage was a peaceful and beautiful state. For Andrew, what was marriage? Tell me. Marriage was a peaceful and, tell me, beautiful state. He loved Christine, a girl, and therefore the conflict was between his steady mind and overflowing heart, and that left him really resentful and confused. Actually, he was in between the dilemma. He loved a lady, Christine, whom he couldn't marry, but he was in love. Therefore, he just thought that if his love would turn into marriage, it will be a beautiful state. But that couldn't possibly be completed, and therefore he was confused between the two. Second question, why did a shiver of horror pass over Andrew? Andrew had struggled for more than half an hour to help Mrs. Susan Morgan in the safe delivery of the child. At last the child was born, but it was lifeless. As Andrew gazed at the stillborn baby, a shiver of horror passed over him. The child was born still and lifeless. And that made, a sign of horrifying shiver on the face of Dr. Andrew. On the face of, this is the last question. What effect did Andrew make to revive Suzanne Morgan? He smashed a glass of ampule and injected the medicine into the lady that was to deliver a baby. After that, he flung down the hypodermic syringe. Then he worked quite hard to restore the soft and weak woman. Her heart strengthened after a few minutes and feverish effort. After some time, she, got life into her and became normal. That is how we come to conclude this lesson. Thank you very much.